afternoon, and welcome and thank you so much for coming for this celebration of life service for John Scott. Just so you know, we are recording this so that it can be put up on Facebook Live, and we have several people in the congregation who couldn't be here today that really wanted to see the service, including our beloved Georgia Henley, so this will make it possible for her to, and others, to see the service afterward. So that's why I'm so far apart. We're trying to coordinate everything here. But I want to just say a word first. You know, I was thinking about John Scott, and last Sunday, Brother Sam was our guest speaker, and he always talks about how important it is to acknowledge your elders in the African American community, in the Native American community, and really for all of us. And I thought, oh, isn't that exactly what we're about here today? Honoring and acknowledging an elder in our community. So I'd like to begin with prayer, as we do with all things. Let us take a moment to go into our hearts as we center ourselves in this time and place. And we turn our attention from the outer to the inner, to the Christ presence within us, knowing that there is indeed a power, that one power and that one presence, the divine presence in each of us, that brings forth healing and harmony, peace and love, understanding and comfort. And so we give thanks this day for this wise and loving and elder in our community, John Scott. And we have the sure and certain knowledge that John is in God's care as he has continued on in his eternal journey. We have been richly blessed by our time of knowing John. We trust that there is a greater plan at work in all of our lives. And as we have released John into your care, dear God, we are grateful for our memories of his life well lived. Your light surrounds us, your love enfolds us, your power protects us, and your presence watches over us. Thank you, God, and so it is. So I want to take a moment first to introduce, I think many of us know each other, and if we don't, we'll get to know each other, but I just want to give a special welcome and introduction to John's daughter, Yvonne Huffman, and her husband, Ted Scott, who drove in from Rochester, that are sitting on, so we are so blessed to have you here with us today, and they brought these beautiful sunflowers to help us celebrate John's life. You know, I was thinking about how fitting it is that we're having this service on our Peace Park, because John was such a true champion for peace in his life, in our lives, in our community. You know, he loved the fact that we had a peace pole on the front lawn, and he loved this Peace Park, and he held the vision, and he contributed to its unfoldment in so many ways. And he worked for peace through his support of Voice Buffalo. And he helped so many of us to find inner peace through the study of A Course in Miracles. You know, and I thought it's no accident that, this morning I was thinking about the name of the organization that publishes A Course in Miracles. It's called the Foundation for Inner Peace. And so I think that John has left all of us in our community with a foundation for inner peace by the example of his life and the many things that we will be sharing and celebrating here today. So I wanted to just give us a chance for a minute to just turn around to a couple people near you and just say peace and blessings to you. Glad you're here today. Peace to you. Peace be with you. Wave across this was I think one of John's favorite songs. He loved all the music we sang and shared together at Unity, but I think this was a favorite, Amazing Things, and it sure says a lot about John's life as well. And so Mike and Anandi are going to share that now. And John did a lot of amazing things. And I realize it's been almost a year now since he left us on October 20th, 2020. It's interesting, October 20, 2020. At the young age of 92 and a half years young. But it just feels as though he completed the work that he had come here to do in this lifetime. And he was like the caterpillar that had to go through that transformation process to become a butterfly. You know, his soul had grown as much as it could in this human form, and it just could no longer be contained by his human body. It just had to push forth, it had to graduate and move on to the next dimension in living so that he could continue to be the student and the teacher that the Course in Miracles talks about. So today we want to share some memories and remember John. And I've asked 3 people who have had a long association with him to begin our sharing. Reverend Allura is going to come first, and Anna Kay, and then Steve, and then we'll have an opportunity for others if you would like to share something.
have so many memories of John Scott because he was so often here at the church and for so many years, more than 30 years. He started coming to Unity, I think, in the late 80s. And one day he asked for counseling. And he talked for a while, and I could see that what was needed was forgiveness. So I recommended that he check out the Course in Miracles group that still meets here every Tuesday, except now we're on Zoom, and have people from all over the world who are joining us now. Well, John did follow through, and he just loved it. He loved Course in Miracles. And back then, the group was just getting started, and it had several different people as leaders at different times, all very dedicated and knowledgeable and highly educated people. And John took to the teachings and absorbed them like a sponge. He learned from the best, and he really understood the value of what he had learned. He also was very articulate, and he could explain things in a way that people could understand the Course. At one point, there were no more leaders. They all had to move on for one reason or another. And John just showed up and unlocked the back door, and people came. He always had people there for the meetings because he really understood and valued the Course. I don't think he ever missed a meeting. He was so dedicated, and he was a natural spiritual leader. He once said that he contemplated being a minister, and he was. And the Course in Miracles was his ministry. However, he wasn't all sweetness and light. He was a no-nonsense person. If he wanted you to understand something about yourself that he thought you didn't know, he would start by asking you a question, a loaded question. And if you answered with anything less than the full truth, he had a way of bringing you back to the truth with a bang that left you breathless for a while. He was very articulate, and he didn't mince words, but he made you think. He was a no-nonsense person. He was also a very generous person. He expressed his caring by showing up and bringing his toolbox and fixing things that needed to be fixed. He was our church handyman for more than 30 years. When I first came here as minister, our church building was approaching 30 years old, and things were beginning to wear out and needed care, and he cared, and he showed it by fixing everything that needed fixing. It was all a love offering, all volunteer. All we had to do was call John, and he was here. And he could fix almost anything. And if he couldn't fix it, he knew what needed to be done, and he was able to advise us. And I really can see now that he was a role model for anyone who watched him. In hindsight, I'm beginning to understand that the two of us were an unrecognized partnership. And he was a man's man, something I could never be. He was a natural leader of men. Men watched him and admired him and saw how much of himself he was giving to the church and how he stayed here for a long, long time. He inspired men to give of themselves and to stay here as active members. And it was just being who he was. He encouraged men. And John had a wonderful sense of humor. When the spotlight was on him, he could always make everybody laugh, and we all loved him for that. I'm so glad we're doing this for John, because when we tried to thank him publicly, he kind of would push it away like he didn't deserve it. And he does deserve it. And he can't do a thing to stop it today. So thank you all for being here to honor John.
Thank you, Laura. Now you can pass. That's okay. And so now Anna Kay is going to share some memories and experiences. Make sure you speak right into it. Really make sure that people can hear you. Yeah, you can just set that
John Scott. There was no one else like him, ever. Those of us who knew and loved John knew that he could come across as a crusty curmudgeon. But we knew better. We would see and hear again and again how if someone was moving and needed help, John was there carrying boxes. If someone was in the hospital, John would be there visiting. If someone needed a ride somewhere, he would make sure they got where they needed to be. If there was a problem with the church building, as Laura has just told us, John would be there with his tools. And I think he kept that up until in his 80s, didn't he, Laura? Yeah. Very close to the end before he let that go. When he realized the importance of sharing the message of A Course in Miracles, again, as Laura told you, there are going to be some repeated themes today, I know. He led the weekly sessions at the church, studying the Course for decades. And when there was a need for someone to fill in for the minister at church on Sunday, John would be willing to step into the pulpit. Or actually, he was usually standing on the floor because he always stayed very down to earth in every way. Can you hear me all right? Okay. One day I spoke with John about Voice Buffalo, of which our church has been an active member for years. This is, if you don't know it, it's a faith-based community activist organization dedicated to creating positive change within the community. It's composed of other churches, congregations, and like-minded organizations. Actually, that day, John and I hardly talked at all about voice. This was mostly a one-on-one personal conversation. But all of a sudden, after that, John was showing up at Voice Buffalo core team meetings here at the church. And he became one of our most active members and supporters. John didn't need to be pushed or prodded or cajoled or guilt-tripped into doing this. He didn't even have to be asked. He saw the need and he just showed up. He helped to host voice meetings here at Unity with Steve Thoren and his crew. I'm sure Steve will tell you more about that. John helped with building the gazebo, which began as a voice project, the creation of an area of holy ground in the neighborhood around the church. Many of you remember that John took over one regular voice fundraising project within this church, the annual pecan sale. Of course, they were good pecans, but John made you feel that not only was this a worthy cause, but you'd be missing out on a huge opportunity if you didn't buy your share of pecans. And this never came across just as a glib spiel. John only spoke what he meant, what he really believed. And our little church sold as many pecans or more than some of the much larger churches in Voice Buffalo. There was something powerful about John's voice and his presence. I always loved the times when John spoke in church, when he presented the sermon. He always spoke of what he had learned from A Course in Miracles, never as a great teacher or guru, but as someone who had been there, done that, fought it out, and was willing to share his hard-won, hard-earned wisdom with us. He was always authentic, down-to-earth, unpretentious, straightforward. You always knew he was speaking truth. And he could be, as Laura pointed out, very funny. He had a dry sense of humor. I wish I could remember some of the specific moments, but I wouldn't have the right timing or the right voice anyway. But he could always make us laugh, and that was part of his effectiveness as a speaker. I found myself thinking that if any American writer had created John Scott as a character, it might have been Mark Twain. There's so much else to say, but I'll leave it to others. There was no one else like John Scott. We'll miss him. We're grateful for the time we had together with him, and wherever you are now, John, we love you.
Thank you, Annika. Beautiful. Now, Stephen.
Yes, it's like the Olympic relays.
Yeah.
I got it now.
Yeah, make sure you speak right into it. Yeah.
Good afternoon. Well, a salute to John Scott. Just hearing the other speakers makes it a little difficult to speak. But more than the things that John did and how he did them, there was just his being there, his presence. He was not an imposing presence, but a steady and a reliable one. John represented something to us that I think few have put their finger on. However, the speakers we've had today, in fact, put their finger on what's special about him. John had gone through a lot in his life and used to say that the second half of his life was about making up for the first half. I felt a kind of empathy for him, inasmuch as I was somewhat in a similar situation. I emulated John's willingness to be of service to Unity Church in any way he could. He was definitely all in. The specifics of his contributions are almost too numerous to name. He was a one-man fix-it team. He helped transform our green space into the Unity Peace Park by working to construct the gazebo, raising money for a glass top for it, showing up for spring and fall cleanup days, and in other ways as well. He was a committed member of our Voice Buffalo core team. He was touched deeply by the Gamaliel Network's statement of purpose and their powerful leadership program. He took their week-long training designed to build social justice leaders in congregations around Western New York. He attended many of their local meetings, and in past years headed up the pecan fundraising sale for Voice, as you have heard. He had been a union man, and he thought deeply about the plight of the underrepresented. Even so, he had no desire to join the power structure, such as it was, of Voice or the church. He wasn't into power, at least in this part of his life. He was into being himself and of being of service. John was a member of several other teams of which I was the chair. Their purpose was to educate and motivate our congregation to advance and deepen its vision and purpose. He gave talks filling in for the minister, much of which was extemporaneous. John spoke from his experience and his heart, incorporating ideas from the Course of Miracles, and he usually had an excellent joke or two. He assumed the leadership of the Course of Miracles class after being in attendance for years. It is the longest running spiritual class that we have had at Unity. The open and honest demands of the Course enable John and his fellow readers to remain faithful to the cause of seeing through the ordinary to the extraordinary, of seeing through appearance to spiritual principles which are lasting. How much clearer must his view be now? Like John, I formed an attachment to Unity Church sometime in the late 80s. He may have started here before me as my guest. Following his example, I became a decades-long volunteer. I guess I must have had a more ambitious outlook as I took on over time a number of leadership roles. John was content to be a team player and a faithful contributor to the church overall, including his belief in tithing. He enjoyed his turn in providing deviled eggs for the fellowship hall and a spiked bread pudding on holidays. That was a big hit. John was a believer, a giver, and a doer. He also showed his creativity by using PVC pipes and recruiting his girlfriend to push our utility shed from the back of the parking lot with her big Cadillac to where it stands today. It was right there by those true trees and pushed it up. So that was something you had to be there to see. The Cadillac survived, but not without a few bumps and scrapes. But John led the 6 a.m. World Peace Meditation on New Year's Day for prayer and poetry, preceding a pancake breakfast for years. He also kept his Anglican Episcopal connection alive by attending Christmas service in Toronto. He loved the rituals and the ceremony, and probably wished we had more of it here. John was a reliable and capable member of the building and grounds team, and would write an occasional article for the church newsletter. I think it harkened back to his younger days as a newspaper reporter in Canada. After service, he would get his coffee and sit on a bench outside the back door and light up his cigarette. That is the same bench which we have newly dedicated to his memory, and a lot of his social interactions took place in that spot, which, as you know, is right up there. John had a moral presence about him. He did not put on airs or propagate his version of the truth. But he was willing to listen and give a considered response if asked. He was down to earth, as some of his humor showed, and he had a faith that was not deterred by the whims of fate. I was glad to have known John. I had him over for dinner once or twice. I was glad to follow in his footsteps, being on call for almost anything, even a flooded basement. John was influential in a subtle way, but was not afraid to voice his opinion if the circumstance called for it. There was a lot more to John Scott than what met the eye, even his own eye. One of the reasons to have a memorial service is to bring several points of view and a variety of experiences to mind, so to better honor the whole person. John would want us to know that there's a lot more to each of us than what meets the eye. He would want us to show compassion to each other, not to take ourselves too seriously, and not to be afraid to live out our lives. John was more than a do-gooder making up for past sins. John Scott was a man of character, and he was always on his best behavior here at church. We all miss him. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. You sure picked three wonderful people to lead off our sharing to show some of the many facets of John Scott. And I had put together on the occasion of his 90th birthday an A to Z description of John's contributions to our ministry, and I think you've probably hit most of them, but I can still share that. But what I want to do first now is give anyone else who is here an opportunity to share, and if you would, please come up to the front so that we can have it be on part of the Facebook recording. Thank you, Joan. Yeah, never miss an opportunity.
I met John when I came to Unity about 10 years ago and started going to A Course in Miracles, and I always enjoyed his shares. He knew A Course in Miracles and the Bible like the back of his hand, and he was witty about it and articulate sharings always. He was always humble though, so very humble. I got to know John a little bit better later when a stray dog showed up at his house, a young, energetic male, and John took him in, and a young dog's a challenge for a man in his mid-80s, and the dog was taken off kind of regularly, so I suggested to John, that's a gentle word, I was really sitting on John to get the dog neutered, and I told him where he could get $100 voucher for it. And sure enough, John followed through, bought the voucher, got Lucky neutered, and Lucky stayed there for a couple more months, but he just needed a lot of exercise. So I was doing rescue at the time, and I asked John if he wanted me to find a home for Lucky. And John said yes. So I found a young man that walks Chestnut Ridge all the time and so on. And I said to the man, are you willing to bring the dog so John can see it? Oh yeah, sure I am. So I told John about that, and I told John that the adoption was taking place Tuesday, I don't know what day it was, but taking place, and but you can have an open adoption and you could see him anytime. And John was very quiet, and he said, no, it would be too hard on Lucky. And it just was very touching that he said that. And I collected an adoption donation, and I tried to give part of it to John to reimburse him for the neuter, and he refused. And I really enjoyed knowing John, and thanks for giving me the opportunity to speak about him.
Thank you. Anyone else? Judy. I guess Judy, and then Carl will get you next. Make sure it's speak into it.
My name is Judy Puffpath, and I was so honored to know John Scott. As everyone has said, whenever anything needed to be done, John was there with his hand out and a tool in it. When I took over the gallery, we needed additional pieces of the wood railing that holds the rods that hold the paintings. So John took care of that. If a light needed to be changed in the gallery, John got out that huge ladder and took care of it. And the peace pole that's out in the front, John and many other members helped put those marble pieces in place. You can imagine lifting a 60 to 90 pound piece of marble, and then Judy saying, no, not there, over here. But anyway, he just was always so patient and so loving. And I made a comment to Barb Sullivan one day. Jokingly, I said, you know, John is such an incredible man. If I were single and he were single, I might ask him out on a date. And Barb said, you and every other woman in Unity.
Thank you, Judy. did you want to share something? Carl's been a member of our Course in Miracles study group for many years.
Well, I'd like to thank everybody for being here today. It's really a great turnout. One of the things I loved about John was his middle name. Does anybody know? Well, his middle name was Denimo. It was D-E capital N-I-M-M-O. I think it's a French term. And you know, back in the early 2000s, I was selling rubber stamps, and John wanted to buy a rubber stamp for his home address, and I thought his middle name was so cool that I insisted he put his middle name on the stamp, which we had made for him. And you know, John had a great sense of humor, and you know, one of the ways he would occasionally tell us about how he came to the course, and he would talk about that session he had with Allura, and you know, he was going through a rough time in his life at that time, and the way he conveyed that session with Allura was, you know, he said he went to her and he had a long, drawn-out, complaining, whining and moaning, complaining session. And, you know, the way he put it was, Allura was a little more direct with it. She said to him, "You need a Course in Miracles. They meet every Tuesday at 5:30. And, you know, from that point on, John took to the course. And I just want to thank him for, you know, having led that group for so long, because the course has become my primary teacher. And you know, if John, like Mary said, I think he was there every week for decades. I don't think he, you know, during the time he was serving as a leader, I don't think he ever missed a session. And you know, there was a long time when there was, you know, there'd be just 2 or 3 of us there. And you know, I'm just grateful that he was always there, because if he hadn't always been there, I might not have been there, and it might not have had the impact on me. I just had an excellent insight about the course just today, as a matter of fact. And if he hadn't been there, as I said, I might not have been there, and I might not have, you know, had all the great teachings and learnings that I've had as a result of that. So thank you very much.
Thank you. And that is true. I think while he was leading it, he was here every Tuesday, even when Tuesday was on Christmas Day or New Year's Day or holiday. You know, I would ask him, should we cancel it? Do you want to, you know, put out, we're not going to do it? No, I'll be there. And he was there, you know, whether one person showed up or whether it was a dozen or more. So is there anyone else that would like to share? No. Okay. Going. Well, then, I wanted to just share a few things. You know, I just feel like everything that everybody has said here is just so true. You know, and his humility. I just remember, you know, that the last 10 or 20 years, he came every Tuesday, he came early to empty the dishwasher. You know, on Sunday, they turned the dishwasher on, you know, at the end before we left the building, and he just did, you know, he was like Brother Lawrence. He just did everything with this mindfulness, that everything was chop wood, carry water. You know, it was just, you know, I remember when I first came here, he was the one-man fix-it team, but not just for the church, but for anybody else in the church that needed help. He'd be going over to Joanne McGarry's house to fix something in her apartment, or fixing things at Rosie's house, or, you know, so he just was, that was his life, to be of service. And every time I would try to thank him for doing something for the church, it was just, no, you know, this is just what you do. This is how we are. This is for him. That was how he lived his life. And I always remember the time when our board had decided that we wanted to honor him with the Religious Service Award to the Network of Religious Communities. And we hadn't done that in a while, participated in those dinners, and so we were going to have him be our honoree that year. And I said, John, can I please meet with you in my office? And he thought he was being called into the principal's office because he was in trouble or something. And I had to tell him, no, we wanted to give you this honor and recognition. And he didn't want to accept it. I had to practically beg and plead him, please, John, we really want to give us the gift of being able to thank you. And so finally he agreed that he would go to the dinner and receive the award and let all of us go with him and appreciate him. And, the story of what happened at that dinner is just one of those things I'll always remember, I think, my whole life. But some of you may remember the story that they made a mistake in preparing the plaque. And they printed the plaque when he got in line with all the other people to go up and receive the plaque in front of 500 people. And they called out his name. And they had printed it with Joan Scott instead of John Scott. And it was just we thought it was a mistake, but it was no mistake, because Joan was his sister. That as a young boy, it was his responsibility to always meet his sister at this corner, I think it was in Toronto, and walk her home from school to make sure she got home safely. And when she was only 5 years old, there was one day when he was late leaving school for some reason, and he was late getting to that corner to meet his sister who was 5. And on that one fateful day, she stepped off the curb and was hit by a trolley car and killed. And for the longest time in his life, he carried that responsibility, that he felt so guilty and bad that he hadn't been there that one day to walk his dear sister home, and she was killed. And he had always felt such great remorse. And he felt like it was a gift. He felt like he came to see it was a sign from God that when he was given that plaque with service with his sister's name on it, that it was sort of a message from her to say, it's okay, all is forgiven. What happened in the past is over. And it was like something lifted within him. So I wanted to take a few minutes for us to be able to have some time of silent reflection, to remember our dear beloved John, and to remember, not only to remember our memories of him, to recall those stories and sayings and things he said and did and the example of his life, but also remembering the spiritual truth about John and about all of us, that we are spiritual beings having a human experience. And when our time is done here and we graduate and move on, that it really is a completion, a celebration. The word that Jesus used for death actually translates as not here, but appearing elsewhere. That just because he's not here now, he is appearing elsewhere. And this just wouldn't be a unity service if I didn't read the James Dillard Freeman poem, The Traveler, because it so beautifully describes this. He has put on invisibility, dear Lord, I cannot see. But this I know, although the road ascends and passes from my sight, there will be no night, that you will take him gently by the hand and lead him on along the road of life that never ends. And he will find it is not death, but dawn. I do not doubt that you are there as here, and you will hold him dear. Our life did not begin with birth, it is not of the earth. And this that we call death, it is no more than the opening and closing of a door. And in your house, how many rooms must be beyond this one where we rest momently? Dear Lord, I thank you for the faith that frees, the love that knows it cannot lose its home, the love that looking through the shadows sees that you and he and I are ever one. And And so there's one more thing that I want to share. It was mentioned that John wrote articles for our newsletter, and he loved doing that. For about 10 years or more, he'd always ask me, when's the deadline, when's the next one, and he just really enjoyed writing those and took pride in it. And so I actually went back and pulled out all the old newsletters and made copies of those newsletter articles, and I thought I was just going to make one set to give to Yvonne, but then Judy said, I bet a lot of other people would like to see those too. So I have about 30 sets if you'd like to get one on the way out. But I wanted to read to you this article that he wrote in 2003, May-June issue of our Unity of Buffalo newsletter. And these were John's words. He said, on WNED-FM's Adventures in Good Music program, a couple of weeks ago, I heard Dr. Carl Haas quoting Leopold Stokowski and his definition of a musicologist as one who knows all the notes but never listens to the music. This goes straight to the heart of how to approach A Course in Miracles. Without a doubt, the Course's faultless grammar and almost scriptural language and sentence structure make it frustratingly difficult to comprehend. We have to understand the Course's teaching that true knowledge is our inheritance from God and is throned within us at our highest point, shrouded by layers and layers and layers of false beliefs and illusions. When we see or hear or read or experience something that is true, it will resonate with what we already know at that inner level. Kenneth Wapnick, director of the Foundation for A Course in Miracles, put it this way: that is why you cannot understand the Course when you try to pick it up and understand it with your brain from your thinking. It's not outside of you. Rather, you do this with the Course what you do with any great work of art, like a great poem or a Shakespearean play or a great work of literature. You let the words resonate inside you. You don't pick them apart and analyze them. You don't let them work, but rather you let them work within you, and they will inevitably lead you to that place inside you that is beyond all words, all thoughts, all concepts. When you are in the presence of a great work of art, be it a poem, a painting, a piece of music, the minute you try to analyze it with your brain, you block any chance of having the experience of truth that the artist had, from which emerged the work of art. That does not mean that there's anything wrong with analyzing a work of art, but doing so will deprive you of the experience that the artist was expressing through his or her work. And I feel like that's what John got to. He got to that place of being able to go beyond analyzing and thinking to just having an experience. And, when he would sit on that bench, he was just going into a meditative place. I think sometimes when he'd sit there and then look out at the Peace Park. And so John said, the bottom line, read the Course and let the rhythm of its words flow through you without trying to fathom every point. The glory of a sunset can sweep over your soul without your definition of its colors. And I just feel like that's true of life, that we just need to allow the rhythm of life's words to flow through us without trying to analyze every point. And so I just wanted to invite you for a few moments to just gently close your eyes and to, I like to think when we do services like this that the spirit of the person that we are acknowledging may be right here with us, in our midst. Or even if he's not right here with us, that at some level he can sense or feel the intentions of our heart,
our words of appreciation and love and reflection. Myrtle Fillmore said, "All that another has meant to you has left an imprint upon your soul so that you might profit by it daily." So we can just take a moment now, and in Unity we say our thoughts are prayers. And so if you have a thought of something that you might want to share with John, or something to say, or just say thank you, John, for touching my soul. But if you have that thought now in prayer, I believe that John can feel it. And as the Course in Miracles says, nothing real can be threatened, nothing unreal exists, and herein lies the peace of God. And so now, Anandi and Mike are going to share with us Peace Like a River.
couple more things. There's a responsive reading in the bulletin that I'd like to invite you to affirm with me. We give thanks for John, who so richly blessed the lives of all who knew him, and who leaves an imprint of love upon our hearts. Together, by grace we live, by grace we are released. We give thanks that John is a spiritual being. Nothing can change this truth, for he lives and moves and has his being in God. By grace we live, by grace we are released. We give thanks for the Holy Comforter within each of us that helps us to heal the illusion of separation from John. By grace we live, by grace we are released. We give thanks that our innate faith helps us to look to the spiritual reality behind all appearances of sadness and separation. By grace we live, by grace we are released. And we give thanks that the peace that passes all understanding fills our minds and hearts. By grace we live, and by grace we are released. And so I want to do, the dedication and blessing of John's bench, and then we'll close with the blessing to the world song. So as Steve mentioned, the bench outside the back door is now going to be officially dedicated to John. We had a Peace Park meeting with about eight or 10 of us about a month ago, and we talked about what could we do, what would be the best way to honor John. And it was just really clear to all of us that that bench was John's bench. Nobody sat on that bench more than John did. You know, I can't walk by that bench ever and not think of him or feel like I can see him sitting there. So we want to acknowledge that. But actually, the bench was actually built and donated by a man named Greg Kolb in the 1990s. And there is a plate on there with his name. So we're keeping that plate on there because we want to honor that Greg built and donated that bench. But as of today, it is lovingly dedicated to John Scott. And the plate, so I want to thank Steve for, hang on, yeah, here, it.
I was just going to say that Greg, he was a member of our church,
Mm-hmm.
and he passed away at a young age, tragically.
Mm-hmm.
But he was a giving person, and I know that he would probably feel honored.
Good,
That's
good.
that.
Yeah, well, we thought, that somewhere in space, Greg and John are probably sitting together. Maybe they'll be sitting on a bench somewhere together, talking and sharing their memories. And yeah, that I did know that. I never met Greg, but I knew that he was a young man that had been a part of our church. And so I trust that they're both okay with this and that it's a blessing for both of them. So Greg's name will be on the bench. And the dedication message, actually, this came to Allura. She said in the middle of the night, we were trying to think of what to say on the plate. And we decided to, Allura, the inspired words that came to Allura were, come and sit where John sat and see the world through the eyes of love. And so that's the message that's on the plate that is on the bench now. So I want to thank Steve for painting the bench and giving it a little Canadian flavor there, and really making it fresh and new and alive. So what I'd like to do is just take a moment and invite all of us to turn towards that bench. Well, first of all, I want to invite you either today or some other time to just sit on the bench at some point and give it your blessing. You know, before you leave today or someone, sit, pat the seat and just say, thanks, John. Thanks, we love you. But right now, let's turn toward that bench and send it our blessings. May all who sit on that bench or walk near it in any way feel the foundation of peace, the love and generosity of service, the wisdom and desire to make a difference that John shared and demonstrated in his life. May this bench now and forevermore be loved lovingly dedicated to the life and the example of our beloved John Scott. Amen. And so we now dedicate that bench. And you can add your personal touch of blessing whenever you have time. So now I think we will also, I just want to tell you, we're also going to be planting a tree on the Peace Park in John's memory, thanks to a donation by Eve Wackett. And our Peace Park team will be meeting tomorrow after the service actually to decide where we're going to put the tree, but that will be happening sometime within the next month as well. But let's now sing the song that just feels like it's so appropriate for John, Blessing to the World, because he certainly was a blessing to our world. Give a few appreciations here. Thank you, Mike and Anandi, for your music. It just always feeds our soul in so many ways. Thank you. I want to thank Don for coming early to set up the sound system. Thank Eve and Bob Dole for helping with our recording of the service. Thank Elaine as a greeter. Steve for getting the bench so beautifully ready for today. And Eve for the donation of the tree, and everybody else that's contributed in any way, please, thank you. And we're so honored to have you, Yvonne, and Ted with us, and we look forward to visiting with you after the service. So let's close with a prayer for protection together. The light of God surrounds us. The love of God enfolds us. The power of God protects us, and the presence of God watches over us. Wherever you are, wherever we are, God is, and all is well. So thank you for coming today. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for helping us to celebrate and appreciate John, as he is always with us in our hearts and our minds. And these newsletter articles are on the table. Elaine's got some if you want a set. I copied them and stapled them all together. So thank you, everyone.